Good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Courtney Mercer. I'm the Executive Director of Downtown New Jersey. Today, we are being joined by Donna Harris, who's Principal of Heritage Consulting, a Philadelphia-based firm that works nationally in downtown and commercial district revitalization. Over the years, Donna has worked with many Main Street New Jersey communities on board training, development, fundraising, strategic planning, et cetera. We thought she had unique insights about financial oversight, and we're very happy to have her joining us today. This forum is part of a series that we started, the first week of shutdown. It's an opportunity for downtown managers, public officials, those working in the downtown realm to hear insights and have discussions amongst ourselves. And just so you know, today is going to be a little bit more like our traditional downtown roundtable. Donna is going to talk for about 15 minutes, and then it's really going to be a dialogue and discussion amongst participants, best practices, questions, concerns, etc. So a little more similar to those of you who have participated in our past forums. So just real quick, for those, oops, I got to get into the right screen. Come on. Of course, it's not going to work for me. All right, well, I won't show, I normally have a screen that tells you a little bit about downtown New Jersey, but for whatever reason, it is not advancing for me. Downtown New Jersey is a nonprofit education and advocacy organization. We hold a conference, we do webinars, roundtables, workshops, etc. We also have a quarterly newsletter, and we also do a lot of advocacy. We both inform our members of legislation and policy coming up, and we'll also testify as needed. And real quick before I move on, I'm gonna mute those of you, or if you could mute those of you who are not muted, just because I'm getting a lot of background noise. So if you're not on mute, please mute yourself. Anyway, I did have a nice slide that showed upcoming forums and past forums, but we do record all these forums, so please go on to Downtown New Jersey, downtownnj.com/COVID-forums. If you want to see video or summaries of old forums. Coming up, I don't have a formal Friday forum set up for next week. It could still happen, probably the week after, but Jeff Bueller and I have both been invited to participate in Sustainable Jersey's virtual summit since they had to cancel the real life one. And we are doing a talk on Tuesday about local economies if you want to join us, and that's also on our website. And if you haven't looked, we have the resource page with lots of information about policy, funding, resources, etc. on our page. So without further ado, I'm going to stop talking about downtown New Jersey, and I'm going to let Donna share her screen and get us started.
Okay, share screen. Okay. Okay. Thanks an awful lot for having me here today. And in this 15-minute introduction to our topic of downtown budgeting, I wanted to focus first on the board's role in assuring that the organization has financial resources to operate, and then discuss measures to take to raise revenue and cut expenses if you have insufficient amounts of either right now. I know that downtown New Jersey members are primarily business improvement districts and then some other Main Street organizations. And I'm sure that your board's concerned about whether your property owners have the cash flow right now to pay their assessments, either now, in 6 months, or in 12 months. And those of you that rely on special events to fund your operational budget have already probably canceled one event already. But your board is thinking now about what happens in the summertime with the events that we have scheduled for them. Or maybe you've been creative and found a way to make some portion of your event into a virtual fundraising opportunity. If you have, we're going to want to talk about that a little bit later in the questions. And then still others in the audience rely on local government for essential support, along with raising money from diverse revenue sources. These downtown organizations or Main Street boards are also worried about government tax receipts that may happen after July 1st when the fiscal year starts, and the status of the current and future government contributions they've learned to expect. So I'm sure all of your board has really made some cuts to your budget and may be demanding more, as expected revenues have not arrived, or they're in far smaller amounts than you had initially anticipated. But I hope all of you have started to engage in some kind of scenario planning with your budget, the what ifs. What if our revenue drops 50% from bid assessment receipts? What happens if we cancel an event that nets us $20,000 to our budget? Can we move it to the fall? What happens if local government can't supply us with the $30,000 we count on every June? Most have already been through one of these budget scenarios, and I was hoping that the existing approved budget and identifying likely losses one at a time is really the way you're looking at scenario planning. So I hope that most of you have begun to look at these scenarios for the organization now, and what you hope to have happen in 90 days and then 90 days after that. And so once your board has decided, then you're going to begin implementing, but finally you have to tell your supporters what your plans are. So the budget experts at the Nonprofit Finance Fund provide advice about how to think about nonprofit budgeting in dire circumstances. And their advice is that you must do two things simultaneously: cut costs and raise revenue fast. Some of your first activities are going to deal with cash flow. So I hope all of you have a budget for a surplus every year, and therefore have some kind of reserve. Budgeting for a surplus is just a good habit. It permits the organization to build up reserves over a number of years into a rainy day fund balance, whatever you want to call it. But how much really would you like to have in hand? Ideally, 3 to 6 months of operating costs. That would really be the most ideal situation. So if you already have a reserve, this is the time to at least use some of it. You may use more of it later on if our closure goes further, but at least to use some of your reserves that you have now. If you have a credit line, you have to think really long and hard about how you're going to plan to pay that money back, but use it if you need it. And if you have no reserves, well, the choices available to you are going to be much, much starker. So the key to surviving is to have a reserve and to budget for a surplus over time. But the first thing you need to do is speed up your intake of cash, or make the cash that you have usable for operations. So let's talk about fundraising first. It's important to say thank you to your donors, to your funders, board members for their support. I don't know how often you do it, but my sort of basic instinct is to thank people 3 different times for their support of the organization. Thank everybody for support that they've shown of your organization in the past. It's important to show photos of your impact in the downtown. It'd be great to send a thank you note before you begin to think about doing any kind of solicitation, but thank yous are always welcome. You should think about contacting your current funders, supporters, and partners that give you grant money, sponsorship, or other restricted contributions that you have maybe in your checkbook right now. They should be asked if they would consider permitting you to use these funds for operating revenues now, to change them from essentially from restricted operations to unrestricted gifts. And the board member and the staff member that knows the funder best are probably the best people to make your phone. The best people to make the pitch. And they should be asked these funders should be asked if they would consider changing the restrictions. Maybe it's a sponsor that has already sent their money. Could you possibly use it for unrestricted operating funds now? Again, they're going to give you their permission or not, but certainly we need to ask these people that we have the best relationships with. And then it's important to thank them profusely for this change, and to send them a gift acknowledgement immediately. So you're also going to determine if waiting for donors to regain their financial stability might be appropriate. You're going to know your community about whether fundraising is appropriate right now. but it also might be good to reassess if making selective pitches to industries or particular businesses that are doing well that maybe haven't supported you in the past, to ask them for their support of the downtown right now. Again, you're going to know what's best for your community. This is also the time to ask board members for their gifts. And if they give you annual gifts to the organization, ask them if they can give them now. Not everybody will be able to do that. You know, obviously people are suffering, but it doesn't hurt to ask. What you can do is bundle these gifts and create a challenge grant so you can use that to solicit other donations from the public. So you're going to be bundling those together, you know, 5,000, you know, if you're lucky, 10,000 if you're really, really fortunate to have people that think so highly of the organization. And that could be very, very effective to bring additional donations from the public to your organization right now. So if you've never solicited your shoppers or residents to support your downtown organization, this might be the moment to do so. You're going to have to know the financial situation of people in your community, whether they have, you know, whether they're the vast majority are unemployed right now, or whether there are people that are still working. So that you're going to make that determination about whether it's appropriate to be asking residents for support. But you might want to make your email to them with beautiful photos, to have a subject line: coronavirus consequences, emergency funds needed. And make sure that the message that you're sending them is urgent. It's not that you're going to close tomorrow. Hopefully you're not. But you can talk about the decline in revenues by 20%, 30%, whatever it may be, and that why it's important for them to support your organization right now more than ever. Describe how the impact is having not only on the work that you're doing, supporting the local businesses in town, but what the effect is on your staff, and how maybe you've had to, you know, cut back staff members, or everybody's taking a pay cut. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. But you really need to ask for a special gift. Maybe it's a modest sum. Maybe you give people giving options on your letter. But it's important to share a story about current successes that you're having with since you've initiated this, since your downtown organization has initiated the stay-at-home orders from the governor. You're going to have to tell people how you're going to use their gift, and of course thank them several times, and send them a gift acknowledgement right away so they have that documentation. I'm really amazed when I read from the International Downtown Center, from Main Street organizations, from the Main Street Center, the creativity that people are using to raise money, either for their small businesses or for their downtown organization right now. So we're going to ask a couple questions about your fundraising experiences in a minute when we get to the questions. So let's talk a little bit more about cutting costs. The big ticket items obviously are going to be come under close scrutiny first, and staff costs are usually the highest cost item in any local downtown budget. So we're going to talk about staff options in a minute if staff cuts are really necessary. But here are a few ways, 3 ways to think about budget cuts. So we're going to talk about them individually. So to give you some, you know, whether that would make sense for your organization to look at those. So it's across the board cuts to all program areas except staff. That's the first one. The second one is cut salaries or furlough staff for limited periods. And then the third one is selective cuts to specific programs or services and personnel. So these three methods are not exclusive. You might use 2 of them to get down to really what your budget should be, particularly if you know that you're facing significant declines in revenue. So let's talk about the first one, across the board cuts, but not to staff. The thing about this one is it's easily understood. It's democratic. Everybody is taking the same cut. All budget items, all staff should be. This is not staff, but all programs are having the same kind of cut: 10%, 15%, whatever it may be. there's the problem with this one is that some line items can't be cut. You can't cut 10% out of your internet access budget. So there's only going to be certain line items where you actually can take that kind of cut. And you should not be cutting anything that's a profit center. If you are collecting money from a parking garage or from another revenue center, you're not going to cut the staff or anything to do with that program because it's generating revenue for the organization. This this option might be good for minor budget shortfalls if you have a 10% cut or 15% cut, but if you're starting to see 20, 25, it might not, this one may not work for you. The second one is cutting all salaries or furloughing staff for limited amounts of times. This one is also easily understood. It may not be perceived as a shared sacrifice unless everybody is cut, has their salary cut, including the most highly paid members of the staff. The higher paid members of staff obviously can weather a cut of, maybe it's 10%, 15%, 25%, but the lower paid staff may not be able to do that. First of all, you're not going to fill any vacancies in your staff. That's like obvious, but furloughs are essentially pay cuts, but they may get the days off or they may be given a date to return to work further down several months from now. Furloughs have been very, very popular particularly because of the $600 a week payment coming from the federal government. Some lower paid workers are actually making more on unemployment than they are when they're actually working. But if you do pay for health benefits for your staff, please, and you're going to furlough them, please continue to pay that. After all, we're in a health crisis. So maintaining everybody's health insurance is certainly going to win a lot of hearts and minds, and that people that may think twice about coming back, because you paid their health insurance, that would be a good reason to do that. You may also start to think about things like temporary layoffs of support staff, or you might reduce the number of your hours from 40 hours to, I know that nobody works 40 hours in downtown, they work in 60, but you may reduce what you get paid to 30. You may need to convert a part-time job to a paid internship, or maybe make a select job into a consultant contract rather than having them be a salaried position and be obliged to pay for health insurance. But in the reality is your staff really is the glue that holds all the committees and the board together. So making these decisions about who gets furloughed or when they come back is critical to every downtown organization. This option is obviously harder to implement, but obviously there's larger savings. And finally, selective cuts to specific programs. This is where you review every program and you cut the weakest programs or services. You may decide in this case to keep some program services whole, but cut others completely. For morale, this one creates a lot of winners and losers. It may be that a staff member sees their program cut and realize that they're next. But this last one is harder to accomplish also because it has winners and losers, and it is dealing with personnel as well. But ultimately, Winston Churchill said it best: "Don't waste a crisis." It's really a great opportunity to really look carefully at your programs and your staffing and figure out, well, what are we going to need when we come back, and what's the new normal going to be? We don't really have a lot of guidance at this point about how we are going to reopen, other than slowly. But it would be an opportunity for you to really look carefully and eliminate programs that just don't make sense anymore. The other thing that it does is it creates an opportunity for you to look at new partnerships. Maybe there are opportunities for you to create strategic alliances with other organizations in the community, or maybe merger partners in the next 6 months or a year. But we're all creative people, and we can come up with a lot of new ideas. But finally, we're going to be communicating about our plan. this is last, but we're going to be communicating. I know all of you are doing that right now, at least weekly, with your constituents. But they're going to want to know what's going to happen in their downtown, particularly as you begin to reopen. How you're helping the small business owners now and in the near term, and then what social distancing will be like when it's required for all these other businesses to reopen. You may have added cost to your organization as well. You may feel it's necessary to install Purell in every store or outside every business, or you may have to stock up on masks for customers for business owners that aren't thinking ahead about that. Or maybe you're going to have to identify a list of all the vendors that could come in to a small business and do deep cleaning. So you're going to have to factor these new costs into your budget as well. But you have to tell people what your plans are. Maybe you do a reopening digest that goes out weekly to showcase ideas and promote the businesses that are open now and that you anticipate coming back. You obviously have to share and tell your stakeholders and customers that your organization has value to them. So this is the time for all of us to continue to be very creative. You can learn from your peers, as we're going to hear today. I'm going to be asking some questions. Go on one more webinar, read the paper, read some journal articles. They all help. But I hope that this was at least an interesting or helpful overview about looking at your budget. But I wanted to sort of ask some questions for you, and I have 5 of them. But the first one is, for those of you that have already reduced staff, what exactly have you done? Have you done furloughs, made full-time jobs into part-time jobs, laid people off, furloughed them while you paid health insurance, or other things? I'd be interested to hear what everybody has done so far. Maybe you haven't even had to lay anybody off. Anybody? Courtney?
I was unmuting myself. So yeah, anybody, if you want to chime in, just feel free to unmute yourself and chime in.
Has anyone not laid anybody off?
In New Brunswick, we've not laid anyone off.
Yay.
In South Orange, we have not.
Downtown Somerville as well, we have not laid anyone off.
Westfield has not as well.
Very good.
Denville has not.
Exactly.
Great. All right. Well, all of you then you must have reserves, because obviously you're not getting the same amount of revenue in. You probably have had to cancel events. So congratulations to all of you that you haven't had to lose your staff, because that's the one thing that all of you know what it's like to hire staff, and the fact that if you lose them, it's like, it takes 3 months for anybody to know what their job is. So congratulations to all of you. And you're all still paying for health insurance, most of you?
Yes, we are.
Good. Okay. Has anybody drawn down on your organizational reserves or gone into your credit line to pay for operations yet?
Looks like nobody has yet.
No.
Okay, well, that's great.
We're downtown Denville. We're still waiting on our first quarter assessment.
Yeah.
So we're not quite sure how much of a hit we're going to take, but so we haven't drawn down on our reserve.
Do your property owners pay quarterly, or is this just that first quarter is when you get their assessments?
The latter.
Okay. All right. So, So do you have any hint about how much you're going to be down? You don't have any idea.
Yeah, I don't know.
Don't know. Okay. All right. Does anybody else have any idea how much they're going to be down?
Downtown Somerville was lucky enough to have already received our first quarter assessment. So we have a little bit that we're working with. I actually, I've made it a point to start conversations with some of the borough council members, just kind of articulating the importance of continuing to keep the downtown funded, understanding that it's a difficult situation for our property owners, and certainly we want to be mindful. And so whether that means, letting them pay late or, letting them pay monthly instead of quarterly to help with cash flow, but certainly indicating that, we don't want to create a precedent, where property owners expect some type of forbearance every time that there's an emergency, because we know how important it is, to keep our downtowns funded. And, we're, pretty much the front line to kind of kickstarting our local economy. So that's, but we as well don't have any real indication as to what the plan is as far as that tax collection goes.
Okay. All right. So do most of you get a contribution from local government as well as your assessments? And are you concerned about whether you're going to get your local government contribution, particularly after July 1st?
Here in New Brunswick, we actually would normally receive something from the county support, and that was usually done in the November, December for 2009. We did not receive that funding, and that was substantial.
Okay, well, like, was it 5% of your budget? Less?
It was probably 3.5%.
Okay, all right, but still, not having that is a blow.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and so do you, have you made some plans about how you're going to make that up, or have you cut your budget to reflect that?
I'm in the process of cutting the budget to not only reflect the funding that we did not receive from the county, but also a percentage of the sponsorships we would usually receive for any of our events this year.
Yeah.
I think that's I don't anticipate receiving close to the level that we've had in the past. So I'm going to have to reallocate our expenditures for that as well.
How about the rest of you? Have you had to cancel events this spring?
Yes.
Yeah.
Almost everything at this point could be canceled for the year.
Same here. We're canceled at least through mid-June, and we're may potentially cancel into July as well.
Okay. All right. Those of you that have canceled events, are any of those events have a fundraising component to them? Besides sponsorship?
Yes.
Ticket sales, beer, etc. So what have you done knowing that revenue is not coming? It's not coming back, at least for that for that event. You've had to make cuts to your budget, and what have you cut?
So I'll just jump in from Denville. We, in a way, maybe fortunately, because our events are mostly dependent on they're budgeted sort of zero neutral to the event. So which truthfully we were thinking about changing. Luckily we didn't, because in this situation it might make us a little bit okay, and Ryan might want to add, but because being that the events are canceled, the sponsorship was covering that event, so it's hopefully not touching as much. But to answer even the earlier question about our funding from the township, I would say we're probably slightly concerned, and that is mainly because our funding from the township, or contribution from the township, had some very specific sort of milestones that we had to hit and all that. And truthfully, now everything is all over the place because some of those milestones aren't even possible, and et cetera, et cetera. So in a way, we're almost probably could potentially have to renegotiate a couple of things with our funding.
Okay, but you don't know, and is that money come as a July 1st fiscal year?
That's a good question. I don't know. Ryan may know that.
Oh, yeah. So typically the township has contributed a set amount. This year, they were looking to draw down their contribution last year, and we kind of, in our budget hearings, did a sales pitch on why it should stay the same.
Yep.
And they agreed to keep it the same, but they put some very specific conditions that we had to meet throughout the year, full contribution. So we'll be receiving kind of the reduced version of that contribution in June. And then as we hit milestones, they were going to send us another check. So that's an area of concern for us, that we're not going to get the rest of our contribution.
Right.
There was some fundraising conditions we had to meet, some event conditions we had to meet. So that's a concern for us.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I in the last recession, what I found, the last recession, 2007 and 2008, the impact for in the downtown organization wasn't immediate. It was really like a year or a year and a half later, particularly when it related to local government contributions, because there was such a lag time for tax receipts and people making, appeals for their property tax payments, that the impact to the most of the Main Street organizations I worked with through Main Street, New Jersey, then it really wasn't in 2008 that they had a problem. It really was in 2009, because it just took time. I mean, the fact that you've had 22 million people apply for unemployment in 4 weeks, it makes this a very, very different situation. But again, how we're going to deal with the very slow reopening for all of us, and how many businesses in our districts we don't think are going to return, and then how long is it going to take to replace them? That's going to take years, to come to.
Donna, Kathleen, here in Cranford. Actually, I was just about to bring up the same subject, which are tax appeals. And you're right, we won't feel them right now as they're coming in. We are already seeing them come in Cranford, a couple of big ones. But there will be an impact going down the road. So I'm wondering if anyone else is already seeing tax appeals. I expect we're going to have which is going to have a real impact mid-year, later, and definitely in 2021 and probably 2022.
Right, and I guess this dovetails on the conversation last week where either if it's a new space, people are already renegotiating the leases for lower rent, and likely, if the restaurants aren't going to be able to have as many tables post-COVID, so they can't turn over, so that without the income, they won't be able to pay their current rents. And along with the reduced rents will then come more and more tax appeals. Yeah.
Right. So none of you have had to lose staff, which is like so terrific. But has anybody, I think Denville, you said that you were using a credit line right now, and do you have, or does anybody is anybody using a credit line, and what have you told your board about how you're going to repay it? Anyone? Okay.
Donna, this might be a good time actually to ask, I think the question that was last that we thought we might not get to has anyone taken advantage of the PPP program or trying to?
Anyone been successful?
Yeah.
We will be applying once, when and if the president signs it and funds are reallocated, we will be applying. Difficult for us in the first round. We needed board approval to apply, and we had to get a special meeting together and follow OPMA and all of that fun stuff, as well as the fact that our primary bank, we have a board member who works at the bank, and there was a potential conflict of interest that we had to work through as well. So that was a challenge for us getting through in the first round. We think we've figured that out. So hopefully when we put the application through, we don't have any problems.
Is it a large bank or is it a community bank?
It's a community bank.
Okay, you might be much luckier. That's the only, in what I've seen from the Main Street community, they've had very few that have applied or been successful. Let's put it this way. They've applied, but they have not been successful. The only one.
Main Street Highland Park applied, but we didn't get it.
You didn't get it. Were you working with a larger or small bank?
Small community bank.
Huh.
That's our bank.
Yeah. Huh. Are you going to apply again?
Yeah.
Good girl. Very good.
I mean, why not?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
What else do I have to do?
Yeah, no, I true. And what about the Small Business Administration's EIDL grants and loan programs? Was anybody successful in applying for those? No?
In Frenchtown, we had several people that received the EIDL grants just sort of randomly deposited into their accounts this week, several, just a couple thousand each.
Huh.
So that's your small businesses. Got it.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
Good.
But that I believe that was open to nonprofits as well. The language in all the applications was not nonprofit friendly, in the sense that you sort of didn't really know what you had to write. So you really need the assistance of a banker to help you figure that out.
Well, and that program ended up being a bit of a farce because it was supposed to be a 10,000 guaranteed up front, which then became 1,000 per employee, capped at 5,000. So you were better off with PPP if you could get it.
Yep. But of course you didn't know that when you first applied. So now we all have learned something, in this whole in this whole thing. Has any a question about your services that you provide downtown? Has anybody reduced your vendor contracts like sanitation, landscaping, or security? Given that there's not that many people downtown right now.
We had an events logistics company that we were using to help plan our events. We've essentially gotten out of that contract.
So did you put it on pause, or did you notify them you had something in the contract that you're going to end the contract 30 days, what have you?
Yeah, we're trying to renegotiate. Depending on, it was kind of set up, they were going to get paid based on the events that they did. So we're not doing events.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So that you'll figure out something with them, because obviously they're once you have events, you need their services.
Exactly.
Right. How about your cleaning contractors? Has anybody renegotiated those?
We are in the process of doing that in South Orange.
Okay. And what are you reducing the number of hours, the number of people that are available? How are you changing that contract?
We're still negotiating that. We have asked for their recommendation about how much they could cut from the cleaning, what kind of difference they're seeing, and they've agreed that they can reduce services given there's not a lot of traffic downtown.
Okay.
So they're coming back to us with a recommendation. In fact, he was just calling me while I was on this call.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, we'll be snappy here.
Well,
okay.
Donna, I'd like to add, so I had a conversation with the HD SID yesterday because they're going to start their farmers market back up. And I know Highland Park is looking to start theirs up too. So related to this, if people are thinking about still doing the farmers market, they're going to need that staff. They've basically, they haven't cut any of their staff yet, and they're going to be full force at the farmers market. One, making sure hand sanitizer is full, making sure people are following social distance rules, et cetera. So they actually need to make sure they have the staff available to continue to do that that program. So just something for people to think about if they're going to try to do that anytime soon.
Yeah, we're doing that same, we're having that same conversation too.
So what's your plan, like in 2 weeks or a month?
For farmers market?
Yeah.
We normally start in June. So we're in conversation with our food vendors at this point. One of the options we're focusing on, I'm not saying we're going to do this yet, but that we're focusing on is to have a similar pre-order, to have people pre-order their goods and have a pickup as opposed to an open market. We have two issues. Ours is usually in a parking lot. And we have a parking authority. And so at this point, the parking authority has no revenue. So if things do open back up, they're not going to want to close down the parking lot one day a week.
Yeah.
Municipal lot. So we need to relocate it. And then we'd have to, we'd have to manage the appropriate social distancing.
Yes.
And that's an expense that we don't have funds for. So, yeah, so we're looking at more of a virtual market with a curbside pickup type situation.
So this is Highland Park. So our market's supposed to start a week from today. And that's exactly, right after this call, I have another call with the borough administrator and the Highland Park Police. And that's exactly what we're doing. We've come up with like 10 different iterations. It's been a ton of work. We have 2 staff. We haven't laid anyone off, thankfully. And for now, we're going to do a modified market with online ordering and curbside pickup, and hopefully slowly ramp up. I'll know more of the details after my final call with the police this afternoon, but that's what we're looking to do starting in a week. So it's been crazy.
Well,
working with the vendors to get them all. Most of them didn't have the capacity to do online anything, and so yeah, so it's been a lot of work. But
are you
people need food?
Yeah, no, are you going to be
safer than the grocery store?
Oh, I'm sure. But are you going to be the one that's supplying the online ordering system?
So, no. It's been because some of them have systems of their own that they wanted to use.
Yeah.
We're letting them. It's going to be sort of cobbled together. And then there's this edible jersey program. I forget what it's called. That for some of the vendors it's called Local Line. Through Edible Jersey, Metuchen's doing it too. And it's basically an online, farmers market portal. So the ones who didn't want to do their own system are doing the Local Line system. And we're just working with them on all this stuff. So that's what we're doing. I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, please do. And then is that Isaac from Metuchen?
It was Olin, and I think I muted him. I think he was actually getting on another call and didn't mute himself.
That's fine. All right. I just have one more question. I know that many of you have done enormous amount of work trying to promote the restaurants and other businesses that are open in your district. And I wondered if any of you have done any fundraising specifically for your organization, particularly those that had events that you had to cancel. Did you do anything to substitute for that?
I mean, we haven't in Highland Park. I feel really uncomfortable asking anyone for money right now. So no.
That was kind of my question, Donna, too, as you were saying that, talking about fundraising for the organization is right. Funding for your organization when your businesses are hurting. A thought that came to my mind was some type of maybe 50-50 or some percent relief fund where we're fundraising and, one portion is going to help us operate and another portion is going to help, our businesses, and that's a more palatable way for bids to do fundraising. Yeah, I saw Olivia took herself off mute. She had a.
Yeah, thanks. Here in Burnsville, we're actually working on a mural project that we've postponed for the fall, but it's the same thing. And we're going to solicit sponsorships and donations for it. It was actually going to be a community paint opportunity and everyone would come and paint the mural. But we've so far postponed it to the fall because I can't bring myself to asking people for money, especially the businesses to sponsor, even though their name's going to be on the plaque on the mural, which is like in the main thoroughfare of the town. I just don't feel comfortable, to the point where I want to now push it to next spring rather than this fall, because I don't even know, they're talking about another wave of all of this. So, there's still uncertainty. And for these poor businesses hurting, if there's a way to generate some other kind of funding for them, I would rather ask people for money for that. But even then, that's uncertain. I don't know if anyone is on here from Summit, or if anyone's seen it, but I recently saw Summit doing a GoFundMe campaign where they were asking, I guess, for about $400,000. They received a little bit more than half of that, it seems, on their GoFundMe. So, I mean, I don't know how comfortable I am about asking money even for that, but it's like, it's more begging, it seems like, than anything else. So it's just the perception of it. It's just very, very difficult to make that kind of decision.
Yeah, Natalie here from downtown Somerville. We kind of felt the same way. I mean, we didn't even apply for any of the federal or state funding available to nonprofits because we felt like if we were awarded some of this funding and the businesses were not, that they would be resentful of the organization, to say the least. We're the only thing that we're really soliciting for right now, and we're going to start soliciting probably sometime next week, is we are also doing a GoFundMe. We usually do a treescape program every year that costs us, where we replace 2 trees downtown. Usually costs us anywhere between $50,000 and $60,000 a year. I got approval from the board to allocate those funds to an emergency crisis fund. And so we're going to start off with about $60,000 in a pot. And then we're going to open up the GoFundMe for donations from the community and from some of our community partners, so that we can come maybe July or August have an emergency relief fund that our businesses who are hardest hit can apply for. But that's really all that we're soliciting for right now.
I think that's really smart, because what you've done is you've reallocated money that you had. You changed it from restricted funds to unrestricted funds, all good. And then you're asking other people to support you. So, I mean, I think that's a great opportunity, and particularly because you're putting it off so that we will know more in July. I think people will feel more secure, particularly if they see some change. Like in Pennsylvania, our governor has talked about the reopening in 3 colors: red, yellow, and green. And with each of the colors, and he's doing it by region. And what he's doing is he's telling people what kind of social distancing they have to maintain, and also what kind of businesses are still going to be closed. Theaters, spas, and gyms are still going to be closed until it's green, until basically they test enough people that there's some consensus that, the virus has been tamped down enough. But, we're going to be living in this yellow zone for months, and still some businesses are not going to be, still going to be closed. A lot of retailers, a lot of small stores are still going to be stuck being closed. So we're going to lose a portion of them, and so they can't, restaurants will at least do takeout and have a minimal amount of income coming in, but a boutique, if they're really smart, they're doing online sales. So, okay, those are all the questions that I had. Do you have any others for Courtney?
Sorry, I'm muting. No, I think it would be great if, if people have questions or topics they want to discuss about how, what they're thinking about moving forward or weighing different options, please chime in. Like I said, this one's more of a, exchange, like our typical roundtable. So I think
We
learn
might
from each
have
other.
we might have a couple of things almost on this last topic, but it would be interesting to get others' feedback. We in Denville, we did have a lot of residents that started GoFundMe's, with a lot of these ideas where you buy from the restaurant to supply food to healthcare workers and all that. And we talked about if we did that as an organization, we agreed that that wasn't really. It just didn't feel right as our organization. But what we did do is we offered our one of our part-time staff to help the coordination of that, and our board voted to help those individuals help coordinate that kind of thing, because we felt at least it got made sure that a lot of our downtown restaurants could be part of it, and as well as some other services. But they've raised a tremendous amount of money, which in a way, just being honest, at some point it almost concerns us, because we are hoping that at some point we could try and raise some funds for some specific downtown things, and charity almost can get a little competitive. But one thing that we've been toying with, and a couple of you have mentioned it, we'd love to know others' feedback, is we really are trying to identify that maybe we could have a series of grants that we do for some of our businesses, and through some of our budget reallocation, offer a couple of grants to many of our businesses in downtown, where we could give them, $2,000 grant, for whatever. Our challenge is how to do that fairly. We may tap into some of you maybe to be on a separate board to help distribute that money, because we feel it has to be very objective. But our challenge is just, how to do that. And if others are doing it, we think it's an opportunity, because number one, we think individuals will give to a fund like that. And we can be very clear that some of it will help our district, but we will definitely allocate, $2,000 grant for a service business, $2,000 grant for a property owner. I would love any thoughts that others are having in that area, because it's something we're struggling with.
I have a thought on this, and part of it came out of a conversation. So we did have, just so y'all know, we're talking about this, the value of bid and what the bids can do to help their businesses, yada, yada. We had a committee meeting the other day, and one thing we found out that some of the bids are hiring a CPA to help the small businesses with their applications to the SBA and all of these things. And I think things like that could be interesting and could be a fundraising mechanism. So either if you're going to hire a consultant to help with that, a CPA to do that, or you're going to hire a consultant to do the cleaning, the industrial hygienist to come in and help make sure these businesses are ready for full reopen, or merchandise designers to make sure that they have the spatial distancing in their stores. That might be an interesting way to fundraise for the organization. And you tell people, we are hiring consultants to help our businesses open back up, fundraise for us, and then you hire the consultants, and whether it's you're giving the service free or it's extremely reduced because you've raised the funds, etc. I think that's a really interesting model for bids to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So would you think to use a local community foundation as the entity to give away the money? Yes and no?
I'd like to chime in here if I could from Westfield's perspective. We're fortunate in that downtown, well, not downtown Westfield, but the entire town of Westfield has a community foundation, and it's an incredibly charitable community, and they've raised over $200,000 to give out grants up to $2,000 for each business or businesses that were eligible. I think they gave out over, 90 grants so far. So therefore, us as the business improvement district, we don't have to pick and choose
Right.
which businesses we give grants to, because that can be really, really tricky.
Very.
So what we're looking to do is, if we have extra funding in our budget from events that we're not doing and what have you, we're going to look to do things that will benefit the entire district. Courtney mentioned one way of doing it is, hiring people to help the businesses with their applications, but also things like new artwork and new plantings and what have you that really will help beautify the downtown, so that when we start coming out of this, it looks nice, which will help morale. That way we don't have to pick and choose this business over that business.
Hey, Bob, does your Westfield, the fund, the general Westfield fund, do they ever contribute at all to the business improvement district? No. Okay. Yeah, that's, I think, the challenge, is because in a way we were hoping that we could raise money for ourselves as well. And we wanted to be honest about it, but we want to give some to the business, but we also want to collect some of that money ourselves. So, but that I have seen obviously, you got the singer of the Goo Goo Dolls, which is a big help when you went to those live concerts. But that's great. I have seen that.
Yeah, we lucked out. We have John Resnick, who's, like you said.
Yeah, I think, Jean, I think that, with that, if you're raising the funds, and even if it comes through a foundation, there's certainly an administrative fee. Any grant, that people get, you can have X% is going to be for our administration of doing that. So that might be a way, and have that conversation with the foundation up front. Like, you raise this much, we're hoping and expecting for X% for us to make this happen.
And I can't imagine that a community foundation being handed let's say $40,000, $50,000 that you're able to raise, they're not going to take a tiny fee also. So why can't you get 10%? They get 5%, and the rest of it gets given out to all of your property owners, and they create a group of citizens or board members that take the heat off you, and they're the ones that are giving the money away.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, I think in the Winston Churchill quote, at this point, when it comes to fundraising, and not to make light of it, because we would be transparent. We know it was a good cause, but I mean, literally, if you were to put up a GoFundMe today that was called, Downtown Denville Revival Fund, the reality is you could be taking that money and lighting it on fire, and it wouldn't matter. People would still give, because it's just that time. There's so much. People do want to help so much. So, there is probably an opportunity for all of us to fundraise. It's just, there's a lot of logistics that we're struggling with, at least.
Yeah. And I think one of our concerns as well, to Jean's point, and you mentioned it, Donna, is the timing aspect of this, especially when we think about using some of those funds to possibly give grants to businesses, or we don't know when we're going to be able to reopen. And the sad reality is a lot of our businesses might not make it through to the end. So we don't want to be giving grants out to a business that potentially might not be there at the end to reopen.
Right.
Throwing good money after bad, in other words.
Right, exactly. So, but to Jean's point, I think the opportunity is now to raise money. So do you raise what we've been talking over the past few days? Do we raise money now then to give grants out in November, December, and just hold on to it until this is over? Or again, I think the communication part is a challenge, and the transparency is a challenge, because you don't want to be collecting all this money and just sitting on it and people start asking questions. So it's just, we're having a tough time because we know there's opportunity. We just don't know how to capitalize on it.
Hi, this is Stuart. How are you all?
Hi.
Thanks, Donna, for your input. Very, very enlightening. I just sent a chat to everybody too, and saying how difficult, I've discussed this with a whole bunch of different boards, and since we raise our funds from stakeholders, which are our business and property owners, which obviously are just in our district, and I have a hard time, and we all have a hard time recognizing the fact that raising funds is something that we all want to do because it feels the right thing to do. But asking our stakeholders or other people to help us in our businesses and support them right now. It seems to be a very difficult reach. And the reason being is that, as some of the messages that you spoke about, is that, you know, at what point in time are you going to go out there and give it to the businesses? I mean, eventually the businesses are going to be open. The most important thing that we can do is be there for those businesses once they reopen, to help the consumers go back out onto the streets. And for them to feel not, you know, that, you know, it's not safe, but what can we do to create and drive traffic to our streets? And one of the things we may want to consider doing, and we're considering doing it in one town, is actually, you know, on a 1 day a week, you know, closing down the streets literally, so people can come out into the streets and have that physical distance that is necessary in order to, not running an event, but basically allow people to be able to, particularly restaurants, if they can put things out there, work with the zoning teams and put tables more outside and allow that communication to go outside and coordinate all that activity. I think we need to be there for them as they reopen, as Donna talked about in our other slide, I think it's slide 13 or 14. You know, what are we going to be doing once we have the green and yellow, you know, the red, yellow, green lights? I think that's a great concept. But once that yellow light is out there, how can we help them? I think fundraising is something that we should be supporting our municipalities with, and helping them and recognizing that it's there. But I would keep an arm's distance as to who you're going to be giving the funds to, because you're always going to be tagged with a fund issue, you know, sort of like, this is my friend and this is no friend, and why did this person get it? And then the other thing is that if you look at the number of businesses that you have, say you have 200 businesses in your district and you're giving them $2,000 each, right? That's a lot of money. You know, all of a sudden you're giving out $40,000, but what did that really do to that business?
Yeah.
What could that $40,000 do in the long term in terms of a marketing and impact that you could now coordinate through social media and a variety of different processes that we would be all using technology now going forward? What can we use that $20 or $30 or $40,000 for that will bring people back into your community? The biggest fear that we all have, I think, is people coming back into our own communities and feeling, and I mentioned this before with Courtney and others, is that it's not social distancing we're talking about, because we are social animals. You know, we socialize together. What we are doing is keeping a physical distance, and that physical distance needs to be disassociated from social distancing, because social distancing is not allowing businesses to thrive. Physical distancing is a new concept, and that's what we need to be able to push and figure out. How can we help our businesses once we get the yellow light, and allow them to come back, and recognizing the fact that we are going to lose a tremendous amount of retail. And what is that going to do to our main streets as we move forward? So that was my 2 cents. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, Stuart. I think Bob's point about whatever money you use or fund doesn't go to the individual businesses per se, but goes to, you know, things that are district wide. I think that's probably a safe bet.
Oh, yeah.
I did want to follow up on your close down the street for a day a week. Yay. We all know I like plazas. But one thought on that, again, that where the district could come in is, you know, if it's only happening 1 day a week, your businesses aren't going to want to invest in that outdoor furniture to do the tables or whatever. And so that might, again, be something the district does, is purchases or rents or whatever, the furniture to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point.
Yeah. Very good. Very good.
Anyone else have ideas or things they want to throw out there, discuss? We've been on for about an hour. So I do want to tell you all, so we're working on a bunch of stuff. We're working on kind of a template for you all to help make the argument to your municipalities and your other constituents as to why you're important. And we're kind of making it, we're going to throw the kitchen sink at it, and you guys can plug and play, because what is important thing that, you know, a Jersey City bid does, i.e. security, might not be something that Denville does, you know. So we're going to kind of have everything, and you can pick and choose. But, you know, I know Chris, I'm not sure if Chris is on or not, Chris Bernardo from Commercial District Services, he's pulling together basically these very pretty one-sheeters that say how many people are coming through, how much garbage they're cleaning up, and how much security they provide, et cetera, to kind of help sell the benefit of them. So we're doing that. And I'm also working on trying to kind of gather best practices. I know last week we talked about, the farmers market. So I'm already working on that. I've talked to a few people who are going to send me things, and I'm going to try to come up with like maybe a one-sheeter on things you should think about when reopening farmers markets. And then I am still, it's in my head, and maybe in a couple of weeks we'll have a forum about, because we were talking also last week about any regulations we think might come down about social distancing when we're in the yellow and when we're in the green, and how things might change. And so I'm still working on having a conversation with Robert Wood Johnson and potentially somebody else to maybe do that conversation, so we can start to prepare to think about, if we're doing events again, they're not going to look like the events we used to have, et cetera. So I'm working on that, but I do ask you all, if you have best practices, please send them to me, because I want to, one, promote you, and two, get this in to share with everybody else. So that's my 2 cents. Is there anything else anyone wants to share, ask, etc.? If not, thank you, Donna. This was wonderful.
Delighted to be here. Delighted.
Getting accolades in the chat. So
good. I'm glad.
Well, without further ado, then I'm gonna call this one to an end. Thank you, and stay tuned for future forums, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Courtney. Thanks, Donna.
Oh, you're certainly welcome.
Thank you.